In the late 1960s, Norway was a modest Nordic nation known for fishing and shipping. Hardly a country anyone expected to become a global financial titan. Yet, beneath the icy North Sea, fate had other plans. This is the story of how one of the world's biggest oil discoveries transformed Norway from a humble maritime country into a sovereign wealth powerhouse. It's the story of a nation that chose long-term vision over short-term gain, a country that saw the danger of oil wealth turning into a curse and instead built a future grounded in stability, responsibility, and shared prosperity. Our story begins in 1969, offshore on a drilling rig battling North Sea gales. Oil companies had spent years boring dry holes under these hostile waters. Some experts doubted Norway had any oil at all. Enter Farouk al-Qasim, an Iraqi-born geologist who had moved to Norway for a quieter life. After reviewing seismic data, he delivered an electrifying message to Norwegian officials: "You're sitting on a sleeping giant." Few believed him, until December 1969, when Phillips Petroleum struck oil at the Ekofisk field, one of the largest offshore discoveries at the time. In that moment, Norway's modern oil era roared to life. Drillers aboard the rig Ocean Viking noticed a sudden surge, the telltale hiss and smell of hydrocarbons. Word spread among the crew. They had hit oil. The news was kept under wraps, but by June 1970, the world learned that Norway had struck black gold. For a country that had long been in the economic shadow of its neighbors, this was a life-changing moment. 1971 saw the first oil flowing into tankers. Yet, with great opportunity came great peril. History has shown many nations that have found oil experience the resource curse, a paradox where newfound wealth leads to corruption, conflict, and economic ruin. Norway was determined that its oil bonanza would not become a curse. As the 1970s unfolded, oil money surged into Norway. Petroleum revenues swelled the national income, and by the 1980s, Norway was on its way to becoming one of the world's top oil exporters. Norway's leaders made careful moves early to avoid being drowned in wealth. In 1971, the parliament issued the famed 10 Oil Commandments, a set of principles ensuring that petroleum would be managed in the national interest. One commandment was clear: oil and gas must be exploited in a way that benefited all Norwegians. In 1972, it founded Statoil, a state-owned oil company, and created the Petroleum Directorate to regulate resources and safety. By insisting on at least 50% state ownership in every major oil license, Norway ensured its people had a direct stake in the oil boom. Norway consciously paced itself. Oil extraction was kept under democratic control, and abrupt spending was cautioned against. This patient, measured approach was all about resisting the urge for immediate gratification in favor of a long-term vision. While oil prices skyrocketed during the 1970s oil crisis, Norway saved much of its windfall and invested in domestic infrastructure and education. By the early 1980s, Norway's prudent management meant it had modernized rapidly, yet remained a stable, egalitarian society. Norwegian officials knew that oil wouldn't last forever, and so in 1983, an expert committee called the Tempo Committee recommended an idea: create a sovereign oil fund to invest petroleum revenues abroad and only spend the investment returns at home. This way, Norway could separate volatile oil income from the regular budget, avoiding wild swings in the economy. In 1990, the dream became a reality. The Norwegian parliament passed a law establishing the Government Petroleum Fund, later renamed the Government Pension Fund Global. The mechanism was simple. The state would deposit all oil and gas revenues into this fund at the central bank rather than into the general budget. Starting in 1996, when the first net deposit was made, Norway began converting oil riches into a diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, and later real estate around the globe. The mission was clear: turn finite oil wealth into a permanent financial engine for the country. A dedicated asset management unit, Norges Bank Investment Management, was set up in 1998 to invest the fund professionally. Suddenly, Norway went from drilling oil to managing a massive investment fund. To preserve this fortune, strict rules were put in place. In 2001, Norway introduced a spending rule capping the yearly withdrawal from the fund to 4% of its value. Essentially, only the expected real return could be used for the national budget. In 2017, this cap was later tightened to 3%. This rule was the nation's self-imposed leash, ensuring the oil fund would not be drained by any one generation. The strategy worked beyond all expectations. From an initial transfer of just 2 million kroner in 1996, the fund's value exploded to over 8 trillion kroner by 2018. By 2025, it had grown to roughly 19.7 trillion kroner, which is about 1.8 trillion US dollars, making it the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. That equates to about $340,000 per Norwegian citizen in the fund. Let's look at the principles that govern Norway's oil fund. Nearly 97% of the fund's assets are invested outside Norway, spread across approximately 9,000 companies in over 70 countries. This avoids overheating the local economy and hedges against domestic downturns. About 70% of the fund is put in global equities and 30% in bonds, plus a slice in real estate. By not putting all eggs in one basket, Norway maximizes returns while managing risk. Norway refuses to profit from companies that damage the world. Since 2004, it has had strict ethical guidelines. No investments in makers of tobacco, certain weapons, or companies notorious for environmental or human rights abuses. The government can use only a small fraction of the fund each year, now about 3%. This rule protects the principle so that future Norwegians will benefit just as much as today's. Each of these principles reflects an extraordinary discipline. Remarkably, over 68% of the fund's value today has come from investment returns and compounding, not from the oil itself. With assets now around $1.4 to $1.8 trillion, Norway's fund owns roughly 1.4% of all globally listed companies. When you're that big, your choices carry weight. Companies know that failing Norway's ethics test could bar them from a massive pool of capital. In shareholder meetings, Norway often uses its voice to push for better corporate governance, environmental sustainability, and social responsibility. In a very real sense, Norway leveraged its oil wealth to influence global business standards. The fund has championed transparency and anti-corruption efforts, aligning its financial power with Norway's values on the world stage. How did Norway avoid the fate that befell so many other oil-rich nations? The track record of petrostates is littered with tragic stories. Economies warped by sudden wealth and riches, accruing only to an elite few. Nigeria, for instance, earned hundreds of billions from oil, but suffered rampant corruption and poverty. Venezuela rode an oil boom in the 20th century, only to collapse into economic ruin when prices fell. Half a century later, Norway remains everything an oil-rich nation should not be: a stable democracy, a welfare state with high living standards, and it consistently ranks among the least corrupt and freest countries on earth. Instead of oil spoiling breeding oligarchs, Norway's wealth is publicly owned and managed with transparency. Every citizen can see how much money is in the fund and where it's invested. Norway's economy, while boosted by petroleum, still has competitive industries in fishing, tech, and manufacturing. Oil and gas today account for about 14% of Norway's GDP and 40% of its exports, a significant share, but far from the only game in town. The Sovereign Wealth Fund became a national project above party politics, a safety vault that no one could raid for short-term political gain. And because ordinary Norwegians could tangibly see benefits, there was broad public support to maintain this prudent course. Today, the Government Pension Fund Global has assets around 4 times the country's annual GDP, a formidable shield for whatever the future holds. Norway's story is often cited as the gold standard for managing natural resource wealth. Norway proved that with good governance, a curse can be turned into a blessing. Norway's transformation shines as an inspiring drama of restraint, vision, and unity. For general viewers, it's a gripping human story, how a small nation kept its head amid a giddy oil rush and chose responsibility over greed. For the financially literate, it's a case study in prudent macroeconomic policy and investing at scale, proving that clear goals and consistency pay off. And for the world, it's a message that prosperity need not corrupt. It can uplift if managed with care. Norway turned oil into trillions, but more importantly, it turned oil into opportunity for all its citizens. The Norwegian people often say the oil is a national treasure on loan from nature, and they've been determined to protect and grow that treasure rather than squander it.